The Great Chamber on Nesser Prime was the largest structure ever built by any civilization in the known galaxy. It stretched for nearly 2 kilometers in every direction. A vast circular hall carved from white stone that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Thousands of seats rose in concentric rings toward a domed ceiling painted with the stars of 100 different homeworlds. Representatives from 47 spacefaring species gathered here to debate, argue, and occasionally agree on matters that affected trillions of lives, across thousands of light years. Admiral Kethfer, of the Vallani Supremacy, had attended these sessions for nearly 60 years. His scaled hide had grown pale with age, and 2 of his 4 eyes no longer saw as clearly as they once did. But he still commanded respect when he spoke, and he still noticed things that younger delegates often missed. Today, as always, his attention kept drifting to the empty seat. It sat at the innermost ring, in the position of highest honor. Carved from black stone that had been quarried from a moon that no longer existed, the seat was simple in design, almost primitive compared to the elaborate thrones and platforms that surrounded it. A small plaque at its base bore words in 100 different languages, all saying the same thing: reserved for humanity. No one had ever sat in that chair. No one ever would. High Arbiter Solemnis called the session to order. She was an ancient being, her body composed of living crystal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows across the chamber floor. She had served as the Assembly's leader for nearly 3 centuries, and she remembered things that most delegates preferred to forget. We gathered today to address the expansion of the Hive Collective into neutral territories, she announced. Her voice was like wind chimes in a storm, beautiful and unsettling at the same time. Their swarm fleets have consumed 17 systems in the past cycle. If this continues, war becomes inevitable. The debate that followed was heated and complicated. The Hive Collective was a species of linked minds, billions of individuals sharing a single consciousness. They did not negotiate in the traditional sense because they did not understand individual desires. They simply grew, expanded, and consumed. Reasoning with them was like reasoning with a forest fire. Admiral Kethfer listened to the arguments with growing impatience. The Thesari wanted diplomatic solutions. The Molden wanted to form a coalition fleet. The Crystalline Singers wanted to offer the Hive new territories in exchange for peace. Everyone had opinions, but no one wanted to take action. This is pointless, Kethfer finally growled, rising to his feet. We talk and talk while the Hive devours world after world. We have the combined military strength to stop them, but we lack the will to use it. War is not a decision to be made lightly, one of the Thesari delegates responded. The cost in lives would be enormous. The cost in lives will be enormous regardless. The only question is whether we pay that cost on our terms or on theirs. High Arbiter Solemnis raised a crystalline hand for silence. Admiral Kethfer makes a valid point. We cannot avoid conflict forever. But we must also consider the moral implications of preemptive military action. Kethfer made a sound of disgust. Moral implications. You speak of morality while that empty chair stares at us all. He pointed one clawed finger at the black stone seat. We worried about moral implications 300 years ago, too. We debated and discussed and considered all the angles. And while we talked, 12 billion humans died. The chamber fell silent. The empty seat seemed to grow darker, more prominent, as if it were absorbing the light around it. That is ancient history, a Molden delegate said quietly. History that we are doomed to repeat. Kethfer turned to address the full assembly. I was young when the Dominion of Ash attacked Earth. I remember watching the transmissions, seeing human cities burn while their people screamed for help. I remember the vote we took, the careful deliberation, the reasoned arguments for neutrality. I remember telling myself that it was not our fight, not our responsibility. He paused, his old eyes distant with memory. I remember Commander Grace Patterson standing where that empty chair now sits. She was a small woman, barely reaching my chest, but she had more courage than anyone I have ever met. She begged us to intervene. She showed us images of the slaughter, children dying in the streets, entire continents turned to glass. She asked us to honor the treaties we had signed, the promises we had made. High Arbiter Solemnis lowered her crystalline head. I remember as well. Then you remember what we told her. We told her that the matter was complicated. We told her that the Dominion was too powerful to oppose directly. We told her that we would send humanitarian aid and strongly worded condemnations. We told her everything except the truth. What was the truth? A young delegate asked. He was new to the assembly, too young to remember the Crimson Purge. The truth was that we were afraid. The Dominion had the largest military force in the galaxy, and humanity was a young species with no powerful allies. Helping them would have been costly and dangerous, so we chose to let them die instead. The young delegate looked horrified. But surely we tried something. We must have done something.
Athfer
Laughed bitterly. We passed a resolution condemning the Dominion's actions as a violation of civilized norms. We established a committee to investigate possible war crimes. We created a memorial fund for human refugees. All very noble, all completely useless. Commander Patterson's final transmission is still in our archives. High Arbiter, Solemnis said softly. I listen to it sometimes, when I need to remember why this assembly exists. What did she say? The young delegate asked. Solemnis closed her luminous eyes. She said, you will remember this day, not because of what you did, but because of what you chose not to do. Someday, when you face a threat that requires courage instead of caution, you will think of Earth. You will think of us. And you will know that you failed the first test of your great galactic civilization. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. The humans were primitive, another delegate finally said. They had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. They had no understanding of galactic politics, no significant military assets. What could they have contributed to this assembly? Kethver turned to stare at him. We will never know. That is the point. We will never know what humanity might have become, what they might have achieved, what they might have contributed to our collective future. We stole that possibility from them and from ourselves. He sat back down heavily, suddenly feeling every one of his years. So yes, I am impatient with moral implications and careful deliberation. I have seen where that leads. I have seen the empty chair that we keep as a monument to our cowardice, and I have no wish to add more empty chairs to this chamber. High Arbiter Solemnis nodded slowly. The Admiral's words are harsh, but they contain truth. We must decide how to respond to the Hive Collective's expansion. Let us vote on the matter. As the delegates began to signal their positions, Kethver found his eyes drawn once again to the empty seat. The black stone seemed to absorb all light, all hope, all possibility. It was a wound in the heart of the assembly, a reminder of failure that would never heal. 300 years and humanity was still gone. 300 years. And the galaxy was still making the same mistakes. Kethver wondered if they would ever learn. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Webb had been flying through empty space for 3 weeks, and he was beginning to think he had made a terrible mistake. The dead zone was exactly what its name suggested. It was a region of space roughly 50 light-years across, centered on the location where Earth's sun had once burned bright and warm. Now, there was nothing there but radiation, debris, and ghosts. The Dominion of Ash had been thorough in their destruction. They had not simply conquered humanity, they had erased them from existence. Sam's small scout ship, the quiet morning, drifted through what had once been a thriving solar system. His sensors picked up chunks of rock that had once been planets, clouds of dust that had once been moons, and absolutely nothing else. No signals, no structures, no signs of life. I told you this was a waste of time, his co-pilot said. Malvik was a Thessary, a tall insectoid being with compound eyes and 4 delicate arms. He had served with Sam for nearly 5 years, and he had learned to speak his mind. The dead zone has been scanned thousands of times. There is nothing here. The official scans were all done from the perimeter, Sam replied. No one has ever actually flown through the interior, because there is no reason to. It is a graveyard, Sam. Let the dead rest. Sam did not answer. He stared at his sensor display, watching the empty void scroll past. Malvik was right, of course. This mission was foolish, possibly even dangerous. The Vallani Navy had granted him leave, but they had made it clear that they thought he was wasting his time. But Sam could not let it go. He was human by ancestry, one of perhaps 10,000 descendants of the survivors who had been off-world when Earth died. His great-great-grandmother had been serving on a Thazari merchant vessel, learning alien trade languages when the Dominion attacked. She had watched her home world burn from a distance of 30 light-years, helpless to do anything but weep. The survivors had scattered across the galaxy, integrating into whatever societies would accept them. They had married aliens, adopted alien customs, raised children who were more alien than human with each passing generation. By the time Sam was born, humanity was little more than a footnote in his family history. A few old photographs and half-remembered stories, but Sam had always felt different. He had always felt like something was missing, some essential part of himself that he could never quite identify. When he looked in the mirror, he saw Vallani's citizenship papers and a Vallani naval uniform. But he also saw his grandmother's eyes, his grandfather's jaw, features that did not belong to any species but his own. So he had come to the dead zone, searching for something he could not name. "Wait," Mulvik said suddenly, his compound eyes focusing on the sensor display. "I am picking up an anomaly." Sam leaned forward. "What kind of anomaly?" "Artificial structure. Large. Very large." Mulvik's voice carried an edge of disbelief. "It is hidden inside that asteroid cluster, approximately 200 kilometers ahead. It's impossible. This region has been quarantined for 3 centuries. Nothing should be here, and yet something is." Sam changed course, his heart beating faster than it had in years. The quiet morning slipped between tumbling rocks, navigating the debris field with careful precision. As they drew closer, the sensors began to paint a clearer picture of what lay ahead. It was a station of some kind, built into the heart of a hollowed asteroid. The structure was enormous, easily 10 kilometers across, with dozens of docking ports and antenna arrays. It was dark and apparently dormant, but its hull showed no signs of damage or decay. Someone had built this place to last. "I am not reading any power signatures," Mulvik reported. "The station appears to be inactive, or hiding." Sam studied the display, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The design was unfamiliar, unlike any alien architecture he had ever encountered. The angles were wrong, the proportions strange. It looked almost organic, like something that had grown rather than been built. Then he saw the symbols on the hull. His breath caught in his throat. They were words. Human words written in English, a language that Sam had only ever seen in old recordings and historical documents. "Haven Station," he read aloud. "Welcome home." Mulvik turned to stare at him. "Sam, what is this place?" "I don't know." Sam's hands were shaking as he reached for the communication controls. "But I intend to find out." He opened a channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Lieutenant Commander Samuel Webb of the Vallani Navy, requesting permission to dock." For a long moment, nothing happened. The station remained dark and silent. A ghost ship floating in a sea of debris. Then, slowly, lights began to appear. They started at the center of the station and spread outward, racing across the hull like fire spreading through dry grass. Windows that had been dark for who knew how long suddenly blazed with warm yellow light. Antenna arrays began to rotate, locking on to the quiet morning with obvious precision. A voice emerged from the speakers, synthesized but somehow warm, speaking in a language that Sam had only heard in dreams. "Permission granted. Child of Earth. Welcome to Haven Station. We have been waiting for you for a very long time." Sam felt tears streaming down his face. He did not know why he was crying. He did not even fully understand what was happening. But some part of him, some deep ancestral memory, buried in his blood and bones, recognized the voice for what it was. It was the voice of home. "Mulvik," he said quietly, "I think we just found something that changes everything." His co-pilot did not respond. He simply stared at the awakening station with all of his compound eyes, watching as more and more lights came online, as docking bay doors began to open, As what had appeared to be a dead structure revealed itself to be very much alive, the quiet morning moved forward, drawn toward the light like a moth to a flame. Sam did not know what he would find inside. He did not know if he was flying toward salvation or destruction. But for the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The docking bay swallowed his ship whole, and the doors closed behind him. He was home. Inside the station, the corridors were clean and well lit, maintained by automated systems that had apparently been running for centuries. Sam walked through halls that felt strangely familiar, past signs written in English, past artwork depicting a blue and green planet that no longer existed, and then he saw them. People. Human people. Standing at the end of the corridor, watching him approach with expressions of wonder and joy, a woman stepped forward. She was older, perhaps 60 or 70, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. She wore a simple uniform, dark blue with silver trim, and she moved with the careful grace of someone who had spent their entire life in low gravity. "Welcome to Haven, Lieutenant Commander Webb," she said. "My name is Nina Hartwell. I am the director of this station, and I have been waiting to meet you for longer than you can possibly imagine." Sam opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He simply stood there, staring at this woman who was impossible. At this station that should not exist, at a future he had never dared to imagine. Humanity was not extinct. Humanity had been hiding. And now, finally, they were ready to come home. Dr. Nina Hartwell led Sam through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The station was far larger than he had initially estimated, a vast underground city carved into the heart of an asteroid that had been carefully hidden among the debris of humanity's destruction. Thousands of people moved through these halls, going about their daily business, and every single one of them stopped to stare at Sam as he passed. "You were the first outsider to set foot in Haven since its founding," Nina explained. "Most of our people have never seen anyone who was not born here. You will have to forgive their curiosity." Sam could not find words to respond. He was still struggling to process what he was seeing. Men and women of all ages walked past him, their faces unmistakably human, their voices speaking English and Spanish and Mandarin and a dozen other languages he did not recognize. Children ran through the corridors, laughing and playing, utterly unaware that their very existence was impossible. "How?" he finally managed to ask. "How is any of this possible?" Nina smiled, but there was something sad in her expression. "It is a long story, but you deserve to hear it, especially given who you are. Who I am, a child of the diaspora, one of the lost ones, scattered across the galaxy when Earth burned." Nina stopped walking and turned to face him. "We have been watching your people for generations, Sam. We know every human descendant in the galaxy by name. We know where they live, who they married, how many children they have. We have been waiting for one of you to find your way back to us." The implications of her words made Sam's head spin. "You've been watching us? For 300 years? 312, to be precise. Since the day the Dominion of Ash turned our homeworld into glass." Nina resumed walking, leading him deeper into the station. "Come. I will show you how we survived." They passed through a series of security checkpoints, each one more heavily guarded than the last. Sam noticed that the guards carried weapons unlike anything he had seen in the Villani military, sleek and deadly and clearly designed for maximum efficiency. These were not ceremonial guards. These were soldiers. Finally, they reached a massive door that required Nina's personal authorization to open. Beyond it lay the largest enclosed space Sam had ever seen. It was a shipyard, carved into the very heart of the asteroid. Hundreds of vessels hung in construction cradles, their hulls gleaming under powerful lights. They were unlike any ship Sam had ever encountered, designed with an elegance and lethality that made his breath catch in his throat. Some were enormous, easily the size of Villani battleships. Others were small and fast, built for speed and stealth. "Call them the Requiem Fleet," Nina said. 473 ships, built over the course of 3 centuries. Each one represents the labor of thousands of human hands, the sacrifice of countless lives, and the hope of an entire species. Sam stared at the fleet in disbelief. You're building an army. We're building a future. Nina walked to a railing that overlooked the shipyard, her hands gripping the metal so tightly that her knuckles turned white. When the Dominion attacked, most of humanity died within the first few hours. But some of us were already in space, scattered across deep space stations and research outposts. We watched our world die from a distance, just like your grandmother did. The official records say there were only a few thousand survivors. The official records are wrong. Or rather, they are incomplete. Nina turned to face him. There were over 50,000 humans off-world when Earth was destroyed. Most of them were captured or killed by Dominion patrols in the months that followed. But some of us escaped. Some of us found each other. And some of us decided that we would not go quietly into extinction. She gestured at the shipyard around them. This station was originally a mining outpost, built decades before the purge to harvest rare minerals from the asteroid belt. It was small, insignificant, and completely off the official records. We expanded it, fortified it, and turned it into a sanctuary. But how did you stay hidden for so long? The dead zone has been scanned thousands of times. We have very good technology, Nina smiled grimly. When you are fighting for Sue, rival, you learn to be creative. Our stealth systems are generations ahead of anything the galaxy has ever seen. We can hide an entire fleet in plain sight if we need to. Sam's mind was racing, trying to put the pieces together. The Dominion of Ash collapsed about 200 years ago. You could have revealed yourselves then. You could have rejoined galactic society. Could have. But why would we? Nina's voice turned cold. The Galactic Assembly watched us die. They debated and deliberated and ultimately decided that our lives were not worth the cost of intervention. When Commander Grace Patterson begged them for help, they offered sympathy and silence. That was 3 centuries ago. The people who made those decisions are dead. The institutions that allowed those decisions to be made are very much alive. The Assembly still exists. The species that voted to abandon us still sit in their comfortable seats and make their comfortable compromises.
Oh.
Nina shook her head. We are not interested in rejoining a society that proved it cannot be trusted. Then what do you want? Nina was silent for a long moment, staring out at the fleet of warships that represented 300 years of labor and sacrifice. I was 26 years old when Earth burned, she finally said. I was a junior researcher on a deep space telescope array, studying distant galaxies and dreaming of the discoveries I would make. I watched the transmissions as the Dominion ships entered our solar system. I watched them systematically destroy every human settlement, every space station, every ship that tried to flee. I watched 12 billion people die in less than a week. Her voice broke slightly, then steadied. Grace Patterson was my mentor. She taught me everything I know about stellar cartography. She also taught me that the universe is not fair, and that the only justice we can expect is the justice we create for ourselves. She turned to face Sam, her eyes burning with an intensity that made him take an involuntary step backward. We do not want revenge. Lieutenant Commander Webb, revenge would be easy. We have the ships, the weapons, and the motivation to burn every world that abandoned us. We could make them feel exactly what we felt 3 centuries ago, but you haven't. No. Because Grace also taught me that hatred is a prison, and that the only way to truly survive is to build something better than what was destroyed. Nina placed her hand on Sam's shoulder. We want what was taken from us. We want our seat at the table. We want a voice in the decisions that shape the galaxy. We want to be recognized as a civilization worthy of respect, not as a cautionary tale about the dangers of being weak. Sam looked at the fleet of warships, at the thousands of humans who had dedicated their lives to this moment, at the woman who had waited 3 centuries for someone like him to arrive, and if the Assembly refuses, Nina's expression did not change. Then we will remind them why they were afraid of us in the first place. Humanity may be small, but we are not weak. We have never been weak. We simply made the mistake of believing that the galaxy would recognize our worth without being shown. She released his shoulder and walked back toward the door. Come, Lieutenant Commander. There is much more to see, and very little time. The galaxy is about to remember that humanity still exists. And when that day comes, I want you standing beside us." Sam followed her, his mind still reeling from everything he had learned. Behind him, the Requiem fleet waited in silence. 473 instruments of humanity's return. The empty chair on Nesser Prime would not remain empty much longer. The alarms on Nesser Prime began screaming at exactly noon. Local time. Admiral Kethfer was in the middle of a routine briefing when his communications officer burst into the room. Her scales pale with terror. She did not wait for permission to speak. She simply activated the nearest display screen and showed him what the long-range sensors had. Detected ships, hundreds of ships, emerging from fold space in perfect formation above the Assembly's capital world. They were unlike anything in the Villani database, their hulls gleaming with technology that should not exist, their weapons arrays pointed directly at the planet below. How many? Kethfer demanded, already moving toward the door. 700 confirmed contacts. Admiral. More appearing every minute. 700 ships. The entire Villani defense fleet numbered less than 200. Even with the other species forces combined, they could not match such numbers. Kethfer felt something he had not experienced in decades. Genuine fear. He reached the command center in minutes. Pushing through crowds of panicked officers and terrified civilians, the main display showed the alien fleet in all its terrible glory, a wall of warships that blotted out the stars. They had arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around Nesser Prime, cutting off all escape routes without firing a single shot. "Have they made contact?" Kethfer asked. "Not yet, Admiral. They are simply... waiting." Waiting for what? Before anyone could answer, every screen in the command center flickered and changed. The sensor displays vanished, replaced by a single image, a human woman with gray hair and eyes like cold steel. "My name is Nina Hartwell," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I am speaking on behalf of the Human Continuity Government. Please do not be alarmed. We have not come to make war." Kethfer stared at the screen in disbelief. Human. The woman was human. But that was impossible. Humanity had been extinct for 3 centuries. "I am transmitting this message to every receiver on Nesser Prime and to the Galactic Assembly Chamber itself," Nina continued. "I understand that our appearance must be shocking. You believed us dead. You mourned us, or at least you claimed to mourn us. You built monuments to our memory and swore that such a tragedy would never happen again." Her expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "We are here to test the sincerity of those promises." The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Kethfer found himself unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything but stare at the screen where the impossible woman had just delivered the impossible. Message: humanity was alive. Humanity had returned. And humanity had brought enough firepower to reduce every world in the assembly to ash. The assembly chamber was in chaos when Kethfer arrived. Delegates were screaming at each other, demanding explanations, threatening military action. The Molden representative had actually drawn a weapon before being restrained by security. Only High Arbiter Solemnis remained calm, her crystalline form pulsing with soft light as she observed the madness around her. "Order," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "We will have order." Slowly, reluctantly, the delegates returned to their seats. The empty black chair at the center of the chamber seemed darker than ever, its presence suddenly charged with new meaning. "The human fleet has made no hostile moves," Solemnis announced. "They have simply positioned themselves around our world and requested an audience with this assembly. I believe we should grant that request." "Are you insane?" a Dasari delegate shouted. "They have enough weapons to destroy us all. We should be mobilizing our defenses, not inviting them to talk." "And what would our defenses accomplish?" Solemnis asked calmly. "Our combined military forces are significantly outnumbered. If the humans wished to destroy us, they could do so at any moment. The fact that they have not suggests that destruction is not their goal. or it suggests that they want us to lower our guard before they strike. A possibility. But I do not believe it. Solemnis turned her luminous gaze toward the empty chair. 300 years ago, we failed humanity. We watched them die and did nothing. If they have returned seeking vengeance, we have no one to blame but ourselves. But if they have returned seeking something else, something better, then we owe it to them and to ourselves to listen. Before anyone could argue further, the main display screen flickered to life once more. Nina Hartwell appeared again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood dozens of humans in military uniforms, their faces hard and determined. And beside her, looking uncomfortable but resolute, stood Lieutenant Commander Samuel Webb. Kethfer recognized him immediately. Webb had served under his command for several years before requesting leave to explore the dead zone. The Admiral had thought him foolish at the time. Now he understood that Webb had been searching for something far more important than ancient relics. Members of the Galactic Assembly, Nina said, I address you not as a conqueror, but as a survivor. 300 years ago, my people came to this chamber begging for help. Commander Grace Patterson stood where that empty chair now rests and pleaded for your intervention. She showed you images of genocide, of children burning in the streets, of entire civilizations reduced to glass. And you did nothing? Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Do not come seeking revenge for that failure. Revenge would be simple. We have the power to make you feel exactly what we felt 3 centuries ago. We could burn your worlds, scatter your people, and leave nothing behind but empty chairs and bitter memories. Nina paused, letting her words sink in. But that is not what Grace would have wanted. She believed in this assembly, believed in the possibility of a better galaxy. She died still hoping that you would prove worthy of that belief. We are here to give you a chance to prove her right. High Arbiter Solemnis rose from her seat. What do you want? We want what was taken from us. We want recognition as a sovereign civilization. We want trade agreements and diplomatic relations and all the rights and responsibilities that come with membership in this assembly. Nina's voice grew harder. And we want that chair filled. Not as a monument to the dead, but as a seat for the living. You want to join the assembly? After everything that happened? We want to change it. We want to make sure that no species ever faces what we faced. That no desperate plea for help is ever ignored because it is inconvenient or expensive or politically complicated.
Hey.
Nina stepped forward, her image seeming to grow larger on the display. We have been watching you for 3 centuries. We have seen your debates and your compromises and your endless discussions that lead nowhere. We know that you are capable of better. We are here to remind you of that capability. Kethfer found himself rising to his feet. The assembly failed humanity 300 years ago. I was there. I voted for neutrality because I was afraid. We all were. But fear is not an excuse, and neutrality in the face of genocide is not a policy. It is cowardice. He walked toward the empty chair, feeling the weight of every eye in the chamber upon him. I have spent 300 years staring at this seat and wondering what might have been. I have spent 300 years living with the knowledge that I helped condemn an entire species to extinction. If humanity has returned, if they are offering us a chance to make things right, then we would be fools to refuse. High Arbiter? Solemnis nodded slowly. The Admiral speaks wisdom, but this decision cannot be made quickly. The implications are enormous. Then debate, Nina said. Deliberate. Consider all the angles. That is what you are good at. But know this. We have waited 300 years. We will not wait much longer. Humanity is patient, but we are not infinite. Make your decision, and make it soon. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Outside, the human fleet waited. 700 ships hanging in the void like a promise and a threat. They had weapons enough to destroy everything, but they had chosen to talk instead. They had every reason to seek vengeance, but they had offered partnership. The empty chair sat at the center of the chamber, darker than ever, waiting to be filled, for the first time in 3 centuries. Filling it seemed like a real possibility. The debate lasted for 17 days. Delegates argued through the nights. sleeping in shifts so that the discussion never stopped. Some demanded humanity's immediate destruction, warning that they posed too great a threat to be trusted. Others advocated for unconditional acceptance, driven by guilt or fear or genuine hope. The Hive Collective, sensing an opportunity, sent envoys offering humanity an alliance against the Assembly itself. They were politely refused. Through it all, human fleet remained in position around Visser Prime, neither advancing nor retreating. They could have forced the issue at any moment. Instead, they waited, demonstrating a patience that seemed almost inhuman. On the 18th day, Samuel Webb addressed the Assembly. He had spent the previous weeks aboard Haven Station, learning everything he could about his heritage. He had walked through corridors where his ancestors had lived and worked. He had studied the history of the Crimson Purge, seen the recordings that had never been released to the public, understood the full horror of what had been done to his people, and he had made a choice. Now he stood before the Assembly wearing the uniform of the Human Continuity Navy, the eagle emblem of Earth emblazoned on his chest. He was terrified, but he refused to let it show. "Grew up Villani," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I ate Villani food, spoke the Villani language, celebrated Villani holidays. I served in the Villani military for 15 years, and I was proud of that service. But I was never truly Villani. There was always something missing, something I could not name." He gestured toward the empty chair that had dominated every session of this assembly for 3 centuries. "My people do not want to destroy you. If they did, they would have done it already. 700 ships, positioned around your capital world, and they have not fired a single shot. That is not the behavior of conquerors. That is the behavior of people who want to be heard." The sorry delegate interrupted. "They could be waiting for us to lower our defenses. They could be. But I have spent time among them, and I do not believe that is their intention. I have seen their children playing in the corridors of Haven Station, their families sharing meals together, their elderly teaching history to the young. These are not monsters seeking vengeance. These are people who have spent 300 years dreaming of a home they were never allowed to have." Sam walked toward the empty chair and placed his hand on its surface. The black stone was cold beneath his fingers, smooth and ancient and heavy with meaning. "This seat has been vacant since Commander Grace Patterson gave her last address to this chamber. She stood here and begged for help, and you refused her. You have spent 3 centuries living with that shame, building monuments and making speeches and swearing that such a thing would never happen again." He turned to face the delegates, his eyes moving from face to face. "Well, here is your chance to prove that those words meant something. My people are offering you partnership instead of war. They are offering you cooperation instead of destruction. They are offering you the opportunity to do what you should have done 300 years ago. Treat humanity as equals." High Arbiter Solemnus spoke softly. "And if we refuse, then we will leave. We will return to the shadows, rebuild our strength, and wait for the day when the galaxy is ready to accept us." Sam's voice hardened slightly. "But know this, we will not forget. We will not forgive. And we will not give you a second chance. This is your one opportunity to make things right. I suggest you take it." The chamber fell silent. Sam could feel the weight of every eye upon him, the judgment of 47 species pressing down like a physical force. He had done everything he could. The rest was up to them. Admiral Kethver rose to his feet. "I have lived with the shame of the Crimson Purge for 300 years. I have watched that empty chair and wondered what might have been. And I have sworn to myself that if I ever had the chance to make things right, I would take it." He walked to the center of the chamber and stood beside Sam. "I vote to accept humanity into the Galactic Assembly. Not because I am afraid of their fleet, though I would be foolish not to be. Not because I feel guilty about what we did, though the guilt has never left me. I vote yes because it is the right thing to do. Because we failed them once, and we should not fail them again." One by one, other delegates began to rise. The Thessari ambassador was next, then the Molden representative, then dozens more. Some looked reluctant, others relieved, but they stood nonetheless. The final vote was closer than anyone expected. 29 species in favor, 18 opposed. A slim margin, but enough. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Assembly. The next day, Nina Hartwell took her seat. She walked into the chamber alone. Wearing a simple gray uniform with no medals or decorations, the only adornment she carried was a small pin on her chest, a blue and green sphere, a world that no longer existed. She moved slowly, deliberately, taking her time as she approached the black stone chair that had been empty for so long. Every delegate watched in silence. As she lowered herself into the seat, the stone was cold and uncomfortable, designed for a species that had never had the chance to use it. But Nina sat straight and proud, her eyes scanning the faces of the beings who had once condemned her people to extinction. "I want to make one thing clear," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "We are not here because we forgive you. We are here because Grace Patterson believed that humanity belonged among the stars, and she was right. We honor her memory, not through vengeance, but through presence." He paused, letting her words settle. "From this day forward, when wars are discussed, when alliances are formed, when the future of the galaxy is decided, humanity will have a voice. Not because you gave it to us, because we earned it. Because we survived despite everything you did and did not do. Because we built a civilization in the darkness while you argued about procedure and protocol." Nina rose to her feet, her small figure suddenly commanding the attention of every being in the chamber. 300 years ago, Commander Grace Patterson warned you that you would remember the day you abandoned us. She was right. You have remembered. The question is whether you have learned. She looked at Admiral Kethfer, at High Arbiter Solemnus, at all the delegates who had voted to accept humanity back into the fold. "We will be watching. We will be participating. And if we see the same cowardice that killed our world, we will make sure that the galaxy remembers that too." She sat back down, and the chamber erupted in a chaos of voices. In the months that followed, a new tradition began to spread across the galaxy. In every assembly chamber, every war room, every council hall where important decisions were made, a single chair was left permanently empty. It was not a throne or a place of honor. It was simply a seat, set aside and never used, a reminder of what had happened when courage failed. The tradition had many names and many languages, but the meaning was always the same: the vacant seat. It represented humanity's suffering and the galaxy's shame. It represented the possibility of redemption and the danger of failure. It represented the promise that had been made by 47 species when they finally did the right thing. Never. Again, Sam Webb stood in the observation deck of Haven Station, watching the stars wheel slowly past. The human fleet had returned to its hidden sanctuary. It's reduced now to a peacetime configuration, but still ready to deploy at a moment's notice. Trust would take time to build. Old wounds did not heal overnight, but for the first time in 300 years, humanity had a future. Nina joined him at the window, her reflection ghostly against the backdrop of space. She looked tired but satisfied. A woman who had finally completed a mission that had consumed her entire impossible life. "Grace would be proud," Sam said quietly. "Grace would say that we still have work to do." Nina smiled faintly. She was never satisfied with just surviving. She always wanted to build something better, and will we? Build something better, I mean. Nina was silent for a long moment, staring out at the galaxy that had once tried to erase her species from existence. "I do not know," she finally admitted, "but for the first time in 3 centuries, I believe it is possible. And that is enough." Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the struggles of the small creatures who lived among them. But in the heart of the dead zone, in a station that should not exist, humanity dreamed of a future that was finally within reach. The empty chair had been filled. The long silence was over, and the galaxy would never be the same.